Dante Russo ended his marriage with a single signature and never asked his wife for explanation. 2 years later, standing in his ex-wife's parents' living room, he stared at the toddler in Sophia's arms, who had his exact face staring back at it. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The pen felt heavier than it should have as I stared at the divorce papers spread across my mahogany desk. 3 years of marriage reduced to legal terminology and property divisions, all waiting for my signature to make our separation official. My attorney, Marcus Webb, sat across from me with the patient expression of someone who'd witnessed countless marriages dissolve in this very office, though I suspected none quite like mine. Mr. Russo, he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, you should know that Mrs. Russo's requests are remarkably modest given your assets. She's only asking for the downtown apartment and a small settlement. No alimony, no claims to your business interests. Frankly, it's the most straightforward divorce I've handled for someone in your position, my position. Such a careful euphemism for what I really was. Dante Russo, heir to the Russo family empire, a network of legitimate businesses that masked decades of carefully orchestrated criminal enterprises. At 32, I'd inherited an organization my grandfather built from nothing, transformed by my father into something that appeared respectable on the surface while remaining ruthlessly effective underneath. The kind of power that made men twice my age defer to my judgment and politicians return my calls within. None of that power could fix what I'd broken with Sophia. I picked up the Mont Blanc pen my father had given me on my 21st birthday, the weight of it familiar in my hand. The same pen I'd used to sign contracts worth, to authorize operations that changed the landscape of Chicago's underworld, to make decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Now I would use it to end the one thing in my life that had felt genuinely real. She's not contesting anything? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Sphere had always been different from the other women who'd circulated through my world. She didn't want my money or my influence. She'd wanted something I couldn't give her, something I didn't know how to be. Nothing, Marcus confirmed. She's made this as easy as possible for you, Mr. Russo. All that's required is your signature, and I'll file the papers this afternoon. The judge has already reviewed everything. Given the lack of contested issues, the divorce should be finalized within 60 days. 60 days to legally erase 3 years. I thought about the first time I'd seen Sophia Chun working as a translator at an art gallery opening I'd attended for appearance's sake. I'd been there to meet with an associate, to discuss territory arrangements under the guise of appreciating overpriced contemporary art. Then I'd heard her voice speaking Mandarin with perfect fluency to a Chinese collector. Her laugh like wind chimes in a summer breeze. Worn a simple navy dress that somehow made every other woman in the room disappear from my awareness. She hadn't known who I was. Not really. Oh, she'd known Dante Russo, the businessman. The young entrepreneur who'd inherited his family's restaurant empire and expanded it into hotel management and commercial real estate. She'd known the man who appeared in Chicago Tribune's business section, photographed at charity galas and civic functions. She hadn't known about the other businesses, the ones that never appeared in newspapers, the meetings that happened in back rooms and parking garages, the reality of the world I actually inhabited. I'd pursued her with the same focused determination I brought to everything else in my life. Flowers delivered to her office, dinner invitations at the best restaurants, weekend trips to New York and San Francisco. She'd resisted at first, suspicious of my interest, but I'd been patient. I'd shown her the man I wanted to be, not the one I actually was. For 6 months, I'd compartmentalized my life so thoroughly that she only saw the legitimate businessman, never the crime boss who ordered executions and territorial enforcement. With the same casual efficiency most people used to order coffee. We'd married in a small ceremony at her parents' home, traditional Chinese elements mixed with Western customs. Her father, a retired mathematics professor, had looked at me with quiet assessment during our first meeting, asking careful questions about my intentions and my values. I'd lied with practiced ease, presenting myself as the ambitious but honest businessman I wished I actually was. Her mother had been warmer, delighted that her daughter had found someone who seemed genuinely devoted to her happiness. The first year had been good, better than good. Sophia had brought light into corners of my life I hadn't realized were dark. She'd laugh at my jokes, debate politics with passionate intensity, fall asleep reading novels with her head on my shoulder. She taught me phrases in Mandarin and cooked elaborate dinners on weekends. We'd talked about children, about buying a house with a yard, about building a life that felt normal despite my demanding schedule. The cracks started showing in year 2. My absences became harder to explain, business trips that couldn't be detailed, meetings I couldn't discuss. Sophia was brilliant, observant, trained to notice patterns and inconsistencies. She'd started asking questions I couldn't answer honestly. Why did my security detail carry weapons to family gatherings? Why did certain associates speak to me with the deference usually reserved for heads of state? Why had she overheard a conversation about territory disputes and enforcement actions? I'd deflected, minimized, outright lied. Each deception had felt like poison in my mouth, but the truth felt more dangerous. If she knew what I really was, what the Russo family actually did, she'd be complicit in ways that could destroy her. More than that, she'd be a target. My enemies wouldn't hesitate to use her against me, to hurt her, to get to me. Keeping her ignorant felt like protection, even as it destroyed her trust. The breaking point had come 8 months ago. I'd been in the middle of a territory negotiation with the Moretti family. a situation that had grown tense when one of their soldiers had overstepped boundaries in our controlled districts, the kind of problem that required immediate, decisive response to prevent it from spiraling into open conflict. I'd been in my home office at 3 in the morning, coordinating with my captains about appropriate retaliation measures, when Sophia had appeared in the doorway. She'd heard everything, not just fragments, but enough to understand exactly what I was discussing: the careful planning of violent retribution, the calculation of how much blood needed to be spilled to maintain respect without triggering all-out war. She'd stood there in her silk robe, her face draining of color as she processed the reality of who she'd married. "Who are you?" she'd asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Not angry yet, just horrified and confused, trying to reconcile the man she thought she knew with the one she'd just overheard ordering someone's execution. I tried to explain, to make her understand the context, the necessity, the rules of a world she'd been protected from, but every word had just driven the knife deeper. She'd listened with growing dismay as I'd confirmed her worst suspicions. Yes, my family's businesses included criminal enterprises. Yes, I was involved in activities that would send me to prison if law enforcement ever gathered sufficient evidence. Yes, I'd lied to her from the beginning about who I really was. "I thought you were different," she'd said finally, tears streaming down her face. "I thought you were good." That had hurt worse than any physical wound I'd ever sustained, because she was right. I'd deceived her completely, built our relationship on foundations of lies and omissions. I'd robbed her of the choice to make an informed decision about sharing her life with me. I'd loved her enough to marry her, but not enough to be honest about who I really was. She'd moved out the next day, taking only her personal belongings and leaving behind everything I'd given her: the jewelry, the designer clothes, the car I'd bought for her birthday. She'd left her wedding ring on the kitchen counter with a note that simply said, "I can't be married to someone I don't know." For 8 months, I'd respected her distance while hoping she'd change her mind. I'd had my security team monitor her location discreetly, making sure she was safe even as she rebuilt her life without me. She'd moved into a modest apartment in Lincoln Park, continued her work as a freelance translator, started seeing friends she'd neglected during our marriage. She'd seemed lighter somehow, freer, as if escaping my orbit had allowed her to breathe properly again. The divorce papers had arrived a month ago. Her attorney had contacted Marcus, laying out terms that were almost insultingly simple. She wanted nothing from me except her freedom. No prolonged legal battle, no demands for half my assets, no attempts to expose my criminal activities to authorities. Just a clean break and the chance to move forward as if our marriage had been a brief, regrettable detour rather than the defining relationship of my life. I'd stalled for weeks, telling Marcus I needed time to review the terms, finding endless reasons to delay. But Sophia had been clear through her attorney. Either I signed willingly, or she'd pursue a contested divorce that could drag on for years and potentially expose aspects of my business I preferred to keep private. It wasn't a threat exactly, just a statement of fact. She was done waiting for me to be someone I could never be. "Miss Russo?" Marcus's voice pulled me back to the present. "We should proceed if you want this filed today. Mrs. Russo's attorney is waiting for confirmation." I looked down at the papers again, at Sophia's signature already in place, her handwriting as elegant as ever. She'd signed without hesitation, ready to close this chapter of her life and move on to something better, someone better. The thought of her with another man made my chest constrict with something that felt dangerously close to panic, but I forced it down. I'd lost the right to feel possessive about Sophia Chun the moment I'd chosen to lie to her about everything that mattered. My hand moved across the page almost without conscious direction, my signature appearing in black ink next to hers. There. Done. 3 years of marriage. Legally dissolved with a few pen strokes. I felt hollow, like someone had reached into my chest and carved out everything that made me feel human. "Excellent," Marcus said, gathering the papers with practiced efficiency. "I'll file these this afternoon. You should expect the final decree within 60 days. Is there anything else you need from me?" "No," I said, surprised my voice sounded normal when everything inside me felt shattered. "That's everything." After Marcus left, I sat alone in my office, staring at the empty space where the divorce papers had been. The apartment felt too quiet, too sterile, stripped of the warmth Sophia had brought to it. I poured myself 2 fingers of whiskey from the crystal decanter on my sidebar, but the first sip tasted like ash. I'd made my choice. I'd chosen this life, this world, this version of myself over the possibility of being someone worthy of Sophia's love. I'd signed those papers because she deserved better than a man who dealt in violence and deception, who could never give her the honest, stable life she wanted. I'd signed because loving her meant letting her go. But as I sat in the gathering darkness of my office, watching the city lights blink on across Chicago's skyline, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life, that signing those papers had been the easy part. Living with the consequences would be infinitely harder. The weeks following the divorce signing blurred together into a monotonous routine of business meeting, territory management, and sleepless nights. I threw myself into work with the kind of obsessive focus that had built my reputation as someone who never missed details, never made careless mistakes. If my captains noticed that I'd become more ruthless in negotiation, more willing to authorize aggressive responses to territorial challenges, they were smart enough not to comment. Vincent Calabrese Andres, my oldest friend and head of security, finally confronted me 6 weeks after I'd signed the papers. We were in the private room at Rossini's, one of my family's legitimate restaurants that also served as a secure meeting location. The dinner rush had ended, leaving us alone with espresso and the kind of silence that stretched between people who'd known each other too long to bother with polite conversation. "You're going to get someone killed if you keep making decisions in your current state," Vincent said, his tone carrying none of the deference he showed me in front of others. We'd grown up together, learned the family business side by side, saved each other's lives enough times that formal hierarchy meant nothing in private moments like this. "My decisions are sound," I replied, not looking up from the reports I'd been reviewing. Revenue projections for the legitimate businesses, coded updates about our less legal operations, intelligence about rival families' movement. Everything looked orderly on paper, even if my life felt like chaos. "You authorized the DeLuca situation without proper surveillance," Vincent said, leaning forward. "You gave Tommaso permission to expand into territory we've avoided for years because the risk-reward ratio doesn't justify the exposure. And yesterday you almost greenlit a weapons shipment through routes we know are being monitored by federal task forces." I set down the papers and met his eyes. Vincent had served my father before me, had taught me everything about security operations and threat assessment. He was one of the few people who could speak to me this directly without consequences. "Your point?" "My point is that Dante Russo doesn't make reckless decisions. You've built your reputation on being 3 steps ahead of everyone else, on seeing angles other people miss, on never letting emotion cloud your judgment. But for the past month and a half, you've been operating like someone with a death wish. The DeLuca situation required immediate response. The territory expansion is a calculated risk with significant upside, and I caught the shipment route problem before anything was finalized." "You caught it because I questioned you directly," Vincent countered. "Which I've had to do increasingly often because you're not thinking clearly. This is about Sophia, isn't it? About the divorce?" Her name hit me like a physical blow. I've been trying not to think about her, trying not to remember the way she'd smiled at me on our wedding day, or how she'd felt in my arms, or the sound of her voice when she'd said she couldn't be married to someone she didn't know. "The divorce is finalized," I said, my voice flat. "It's done, is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you're acting like a man who's still bleeding from a wound he's pretending doesn't exist." I stood abrupt, moving to the window that overlooked the restaurant's parking lot. Outside, Chicago carried on with its usual rhythm, people moving through their lives unaware of the carefully orchestrated systems that kept order in the shadows. "I made my choice," I said quietly. "I signed the papers. I let her go because she deserved better than what I could give her. And now you're punishing yourself by making dangerous decisions. I'm running my business. You're trying to feel something other than regret." Vincent joined me at the window, his reflection visible in the glass beside mine. "I watched your father do something similar after your mother passed. He threw himself into increasingly risky operations, took chances that could have destroyed everything he'd built. It took your Uncle Marco 6 months to pull him back from the edge. I'd been 17 when my mother died. Cancer, though I'd always suspected the stress of being married to a man like my father had contributed to her illness. She'd known what he was, had chosen that life with open eyes, but the knowledge had worn on her over the years. I'd watched her deteriorate, not just physically, but emotionally, carrying the weight of secrets that could never be shared outside our family. That was why I tried to keep Sophia separate from my real life. I'd wanted to protect her from that same corrosive burden, from the constant anxiety of knowing the truth about the man she'd married. Instead, I just trapped her in a different kind of lie, one that had ultimately destroyed us anyway. "Sophia wasn't like my mother," I said. "She wouldn't have chosen this life if I'd been honest from the beginning. She would have walked away." Maybe Vincent agreed, or maybe she would have surprised you, but you'll never know because you decided for her what she could handle. The observation cut deeper than I wanted to admit. It doesn't matter now. She's moved on. She's building a life that doesn't include me. You're still having her followed. I turned to face him, not bothering to deny it. "For security purposes, she was married to me for 3 years. That makes her a potential target for anyone who wants leverage against the Russo family. She's been divorced from you for 2 months now. Most of your enemies are smart enough to know that hurting an ex-wife wouldn't accomplish anything except bringing down heat they don't want. You're not protecting her, Dante. You're torturing yourself." He was right, of course. The daily reports from the surveillance team served no strategic purpose. They just fed my need to know she was okay, to track the life she was building without me. She'd started taking morning runs along the lakefront. She'd joined a book club with other translators. She'd had dinner with a colleague 3 times in the past 2 weeks, though the surveillance team reported it appeared professional rather than romantic. That last detail had occupied too much of my attention, spawning questions I had no right to ask. Was she seeing someone? Had she already moved on while I was still stuck in the moment I'd signed those papers? The jealousy that surged through me at the thought was irrational and unwelcome, a reminder that I'd lost the right to care about Sophia's romantic life the moment I'd chosen my world over our marriage. "Pull the surveillance team," I said, the words rewards costing more than they should. You're right, it's not serving any legitimate security purpose. Vincent's expression showed surprise and something that might have been approval. That's the smartest decision you've made in weeks. Don't push your luck, he smiled. The kind of expression that reminded me we'd been friends long before we'd been boss and subordinate. There's something else. No. The Moretti family has been making moves in our South Side territories. Nothing overt enough to justify immediate retaliation. But Antonio Moretti has been talking to some of our street-level operators, testing their loyalty. The information snapped my focus back to business matters, to the kind of problems that could be solved through strategy and force, rather than the emotional wreckage of my failed marriage. How long has this been happening? 3 weeks. I've been monitoring it, gathering intelligence about their objectives before bringing it to your attention. I didn't want to present you with incomplete information while you were distracted. I'm not distracted anymore, I said, and tried to make it true through sheer force of will. Set up a meeting with our captains tomorrow afternoon. I want comprehensive assessment of our Southside operation, list of everyone who's had contact with Moretti's people, and strategic options for response that don't escalate into open conflict. Vincent nodded, pulling out his phone to send the necessary message. You want me to reach out to Antonio directly? Feel out his intentions before we commit to a response? No, let him think we haven't noticed his movements yet. Gives us the advantage of seeming unaware while we gather intelligence and position ourselves strategically. There's the Dante Russo I know, Vincent said with satisfaction. Welcome back. But as I returned to reviewing reports, trying to lose myself in the familiar rhythms of business operations and strategic planning, I couldn't shake Vincent's earlier words. I'd been punishing myself through reckless decisions, trying to feel something other than the hollow emptiness that had settled in my chest since signing those divorce papers. Pulling the surveillance on Sophia felt like cutting my last connection to her, acknowledging that she truly was gone from my life. The next day brought the captain's meeting Vincent had arranged. 6 men who'd served my family for years gathered in the conference room of Russo Enterprises' downtown office. To outside observers, we looked like any other corporate meeting, discussing expansion strategies and operational efficiency. But the coded language we used told a different story, one about territory control and enforcement action, and the delicate balance of power that kept Chicago's underworld from descending into chaos. Moretti's testing boundaries, Michael Pastor reported. The Southside operations captain whose sharp instincts had served us well for a decade. He's offering better terms to street dealers, promising protection from competitors, basically trying to peel away our lowest level operators piece by piece. How many have we lost? I asked, studying the organizational charts spread across the conference table. None yet. But the offers are generous enough that it's only a matter of time before someone decides the risk of leave worth the reward Moretti's promising. Then we make the risk not worth it, I said simply. Identify our most vulnerable operators, the ones most likely to be tempted. Improve their terms before Moretti can get his hooks in. Show them that loyalty to the Russo family is rewarded, and the ones who've already been approached but haven't reported it? Vincent asked, knowing as well as I did that such operators existed. Give them 48 hours to come forward voluntarily. Anyone who waits longer than that gets treated as a security risk. The men around the table nodded, understanding the implications. In our world, security risks were eliminated permanently. It was harsh, but necessary. The moment we showed weakness, the moment we failed to respond decisively to challenges, other families would sense opportunity and move against us. 2 months after the divorce became final, I found myself standing in the children's wing of Northwestern Memorial Hospital, surrounded by balloons and stuffed animals that seemed absurdly cheerful given my usual surroundings. My cousin Maria had given birth to her 3rd child, a daughter she'd named Rosa after our grandmother. Family obligation demanded my presence, though I felt like an imposter among the celebrating relatives, pretending to share their joy while feeling nothing but hollow emptiness. She has your mother's eyes, my Aunt Francesca said, appearing beside me with the practiced stealth that ran in our family. She'd been my father's younger sister, one of the few women in our world who understood exactly what the Russo name meant and accepted it without flinching. Dante, you look terrible. Thank you, Zia. Your honesty is always refreshing. She smiled, but her dark eyes held concern. When was the last time you slept properly? Or ate a meal that wasn't delivered from one of your restaurants? I'm fine. You're a terrible liar. Which is surprising given your profession requires constant deception. She linked her arm through mine, steering me away from the crowd of relatives cooing over the new baby. Talk to me, not as your aunt, but as someone who understands what it costs to live this life. I'd always been closer to Aunt Francesca than my other relatives. She'd married into a legitimate business family, choosing a different path than her brother, but she'd never judged the choices my father made or the legacy I'd inherited. She understood that we didn't exactly choose this world. We were born into it, shaped by it, and the only real choice was whether to embrace it or try to escape it. The divorce is finalized, I said simply, as if that explained everything. I know. I also know you loved Sophia in a way your father never loved any of his mistresses or even your mother. God rest her soul. That kind of love doesn't just disappear because papers are signed. We'd reached a small waiting area away from the celebration. Through the windows, Chicago sprawled beneath us. Millions of people living lives that didn't involve the constant calculation of risk and reward, loyalty and betrayal. She deserved better than what I could give her, perhaps. Or perhaps you decided what she deserved without giving her the choice. Aunt Francesca's words echoed what Vincent had said, a truth I'd been avoiding for months. Your mother knew what your father was before she married. She made that choice with open eyes, and it destroyed her. No, Dante. What destroyed her was your father's inability to compartmentalize, his constant bringing home the darkness of his work. She could have handled the knowledge. What she couldn't handle was living with a man who never left that world behind, who sat at the dinner table discussing territory disputes while she tried to maintain some sense of normalcy. For you and your sister, I'd never heard my aunt speak this directly about my parents' marriage. The cancer that killed my mother had been a mercy compared to the slow erosion of her spirit during my father's final years, when his obsession with maintaining power had consumed everything else. I kept Sophia separate to protect her, I said. I gave her a version of me that was closer to who I wanted to be rather than who I actually am. And in doing so, you denied her the chance to love the real you. Tell me, Dante, in all your time together, did she ever show signs of being weak? Of being unable to handle difficult truths? I thought about Sophia's strength, the way she'd stood up to her own traditional parents when they'd questioned her career choices, how she'd built her translation business from nothing through sheer determination and skill. She'd negotiated with difficult clients, worked in high-pressure situations, handled conflicts with the kind of grace that came from genuine confidence rather than false bravado. No, I admitted, she was always stronger than I gave her credit for. Then perhaps the person you were protecting wasn't her at all. The observation hung in the air between us, uncomfortable and true. I had told myself for 3 years that keeping Sophia ignorant of my real life was about protecting her, but maybe it had been about protecting myself, about not having to see the disappointment in her eyes when she understood what I truly was, about maintaining the fiction that I could be someone worthy of her love. It's too late now, I said. The divorce is final. She's moved on with her life. Has she? Or have you simply decided that's what must be true because it's easier than fighting for something you want? Aunt Francesca squeezed my arm gently. Life is long, Dante. Mistakes can sometimes be corrected if we're brave enough to try. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with a message from Vincent. We had a problem, the kind that required immediate attention. I excused myself from my aunt, kissing her cheek and promising to visit more often, though we both knew such promises were rarely kept in our world. The problem turned out to be exactly the kind of situation I'd been expecting since the Moretti encroachment began. One of our South Side operators, a low-level dealer named Tommy Ritchie, had disappeared 3 days ago. His apartment showed signs of a struggle, though no body had been found. Intelligence suggested he'd been approached by Moretti's people and had declined their offer, remaining loyal to the Russo family. They took him to send a message, Vincent explained as we stood in my office later that evening. Show that declining their generous offers has consequences. Make other operators think twice about staying loyal to us. Do we have any leads on his location? Marco's working his informant network. If Richie's alive, we'll find him within 48 hours. If he's dead, the body will surface eventually as a warning. I moved to the window, looking out at the city lights that had become my constant companion during sleepless nights. Somewhere out there, a young man was probably being tortured or was already dead because he'd remained loyal to my family. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders with familiar heaviness. When we find him or find out what happened to him, I want comprehensive response options. Moretti needs to understand that taking our people has consequences that far outweigh whatever territorial ambitions he's pursuing. You're talking about open conflict. I'm talking about proportional response that makes the cost of his aggression too high to continue. Vincent nodded slowly, understanding the distinction. We weren't seeking war, but we needed to demonstrate strength. In our world, perceived weakness invited attack. The Moretti family needed to understand that the Russo organization wasn't vulnerable, wasn't distracted, wasn't soft, despite whatever rumors might be circulating about my personal life. I'll coordinate with the other captains. We'll have options for you by tomorrow morning. After Vincent left, I poured myself a drink and returned to the window. The whiskey burned going down, but it did nothing to warm the cold that had settled in my chest since signing those divorce papers. I'd built an empire through careful strategy and calculated risk, maintained power through a reputation for being fair but ruthless, commanded respect from men who'd served my family for decades, but I couldn't fix the one thing that actually mattered. I couldn't go back and make different choices with Sophia. I couldn't be honest from the beginning about who I was. I couldn't give her the normal life she deserved while remaining true to the responsibilities I'd inherited. My phone buzzed again, this time with a message from an unknown number. For a moment, my heart jumped with the irrational hope that it might be Sophia, that she might have reached out despite everything. Instead, it was a forwarded message from my investigator, the man I'd hired to do one final check on Sophia's well-being before I'd ordered the surveillance stop. The message contained a single photo, clearly taken from a distance with a telephoto lens. Sophia standing outside her apartment building talking with someone I didn't recognize. A woman around her age, both of them laughing at something. Sophia looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in the final months of our marriage. Relaxed and genuinely joyful rather than the careful contentment she'd projected when she'd still been trying to make our relationship work. I should have deleted the photo immediately, should have honored my decision to stop monitoring her life. Instead, found myself studying her face, memorizing the curve of her smile, the way her hair fell across her shoulders, all the small details I'd tried to stop thinking about. She'd moved on. She was building a life that didn't include me. That was what I'd wanted, what I'd pushed her toward by refusing to be honest about who I really was. So why did seeing evidence of her happiness feel like another knife between my ribs? I deleted the photo and blocked the investigator's number. That part of my life was over. I'd made my choices, signed the papers, let her go. Now I needed to focus on the responsibilities I still had, the empire that required constant vigilance, the men who depended on my leadership. But as I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the trappings of power that suddenly felt meaningless, I couldn't shake Aunt Francesca's words. Had I been protecting Sophia, or had I been protecting myself from having to face what I'd become? And if I'd made a mistake, was it too late to correct it? The city lights blurred as exhaustion finally caught up with me. I had decisions to make about the Moretti situation. Operations to oversee, 100 responsibilities that couldn't be ignored. My personal regrets would have to wait. They always did. 6 months post-divorce, I'd almost convinced myself I'd moved on. Almost. The word carried the weight of self-deception I'd become expert at recognizing in others, but struggled to acknowledge in myself. I'd buried myself in work, expanded operations into new territories, negotiated peace with the Moretti family through a combination of strategic concessions and carefully demonstrated force. Tommy Ritchie had been found alive, beaten but not permanently damaged, and our response had made it clear that taking Russo people came with costs Antonio Moretti wasn't willing to pay. Everything looked orderly from the outside. The legitimate businesses thrived, providing perfect cover for less legal operations, and captains reported smooth operations across all territories. Law enforcement showed no signs of building cases against us. I attended family gatherings, maintained relationships with political allies, presented the image of a successful young businessman who'd inherited his father's empire and expanded it with modern sensibilities. But late at night, alone in the apartment that still smelled faintly of Sophia's perfume despite multiple deep cleanings, I couldn't escape the truth. I traded the possibility of genuine happiness for the security of familiar misery. I'd chosen power over love because power was something I understood, something I could control through strategy and force. Love had proven far more complicated. "You need to start dating again," my sister Gabriella announced over Sunday dinner at my apartment. She'd appointed herself my social guardian since the divorce, apparently convinced that my workaholic tendencies needed intervention before I became one of those bitter old men who died alone, surrounded by money and regrets. "I'm not interested in dating. You're 33 years old. Successful, reasonably attractive when you're not scowling, and you act like a widower mourning his lost love. It's been 6 months, Dante. Sophia has moved on. You should too." The casual mention of Sophia moving on made my chest tight. "What do you mean she's moved on?" Gabriella's eyes widened slightly, realizing she'd revealed something she hadn't intended. "I just meant that she's probably living her life. Not that I know anything specific." Gabriella, my sister, had never been able to lie to me effectively. We'd been close growing up, closer after our mother's death when I'd taken on a protective role that had shaped both our lives. She knew me well enough to recognize when pushing would be counterproductive, but she also knew I'd get the information eventually. "Fine," she said, setting down her wine glass. "I ran into her 3 weeks ago at that gallery opening downtown, the one for contemporary Asian artists. She was there with someone. Every muscle in my body tense, defined with someone. A man. They seemed close, comfortable with each other. I didn't approach them because I thought it would be awkward, but Dante, she looked happy, really happy, the kind of happiness she didn't have in those last months with you." I stood abruptly, moving to the window that had become my refuge during difficult conversations. Chicago spread out below, indifferent to the jealousy and regret churning through me. Sophia was dating someone. Of course she was. She was beautiful, intelligent, accomplished. Why wouldn't she move on with her life? Who was he? I don't know. I didn't recognize him. Doesn't matter. It shouldn't have mattered. I'd signed the divorce papers, let her go, accepted that she deserved better than what I could offer. But the image of Sophia with another man, laughing and happy in a way she hadn't been with me, felt like betrayal, even though I had no right to feel betrayed. "No," I lied. "It doesn't matter." Gabriella joined me at the window, her hand finding my arm in a gesture of comfort. "You still love her. I'll let her go. Those aren't mutually exclusive, Fratello. You can love someone and still recognize that being together isn't possible. That doesn't make the love less real or the loss less painful." I thought about the divorce papers. I'd signed without hesitation, the surveillance I'd terminated, the deliberate distance I'd maintained. All of it had been about protecting Sophia from my world, from the darkness that defined my life. But maybe Aunt Francesca and Vincent had been right. Maybe I'd been protecting myself from having to risk rejection, from having to offer the real me and watch her walk away anyway. "She's better off without me," I said, the words tasting like ash. "Probably," Gabriella agreed with characteristic bluntness, "but that doesn't mean you're better off without her. And until you accept that and actually deal with it, you're going to keep punishing yourself through work and isolation." After my sister left, I did something I'd sworn not to do. I called the investigator I'd blocked 6 months earlier, the one who'd sent me that photo of Sophia looking happy. His voice when he answered suggested he'd been expecting my call eventually. Russo, it's been a while. I need information, discreet information, about my ex-wife. The surveillance kind or just general status update? I don't want her followed. Just basic information. Who she's seeing, whether it's serious, how she's doing. The investigator was quiet for a moment. Mr. Russo, if you don't mind me saying. This sounds like something that's only going to make you feel worse. I'm not paying you for psychological counseling. Fair enough. Give me 48 hours. The 48 hours felt like weeks. I threw myself into work with even more intensity than usual, reviewing operations reports until my eyes burned, attending meetings that could have been handled by subordinates. Anything to avoid thinking about what the investigator might discover. But late at night, alone with whiskey and regret, my imagination conjured images I couldn't escape. Sophia in love with someone else, planning a future with a man who wasn't me, building the normal life she'd always deserved. The investigator's report arrived via encrypted email exactly 48 hours later. I stared at the unopened attachment for 10 minutes before finally clicking it open. Inside was a detailed summary that somehow made everything worse while simultaneously providing strange relief. Sophia was indeed seeing someone, Marcus Chun, a fellow translator she'd met through professional circles. They'd been on approximately 8 dates over the past month, all public, all seemingly casual. The investigator's assessment suggested it was early stages. Nothing serious yet, though Marcus appeared interested in developing something more significant. Sophia's behavior indicated she was taking things slowly, cautious in a way that spoke to lingering hurt from our failed marriage. The report included photos that I knew I shouldn't look at but couldn't help examine. Sophia at a coffee shop with Marcus, both of them laughing over something on his phone. Sophia and Marcus at a bookstore standing close while browsing shelves. Nothing inappropriate, nothing that crossed lines, but intimate in ways that made jealousy surge through me with surprising intensity. I deleted the report and blocked the investigator's number again, this time with more finality. Whatever Sophia did with her life was no longer my business. I'd made my choice when I'd signed those divorce papers. The fact that living with those consequences hurt worse than I'd anticipated didn't give me the right to monitor her life or interfere with her chance at happiness, but I couldn't stop thinking about Marcus Chun. The investigator had included basic background information that painted a picture of exactly the kind of man Sophia deserved. Legitimate businessman, no criminal connection, master's degree in linguistics, active in the local Chinese American community. Someone who could give her the normal life I never could, who wouldn't bring danger and deception into her world. The rational part of my brain recognized this was good for Sophia. The emotional part wanted to make Marcus Chun disappear from her life through the same methods I used to eliminate business threats. The conflict between those impulses told me everything I needed to know about why our marriage had failed. I couldn't separate the criminal from the man, couldn't love someone without wanting to control their entire environment, couldn't accept that Sophia's happiness might not include me. 3 months later, as winter settled over Chicago with the kind of cold that felt personal, I received an invitation to Sophia's father's 70th birthday celebration. The formal card arrived at my office, my name written in elegant calligraphy that I recognized as Sophia's handwriting. A brief note was included, her words carefully polite and distant. Dear Dante, despite everything that happened between us, you were part of our family for 3 years. My parents would be honored if you'd attend the celebration. I understand if you'd prefer not to come, but wanted to extend the invitation. Best regards, Sophia. Best regards. The formal closing felt like a knife between the ribs. We'd gone from lovers to strangers, from sharing a life to exchanging polite correspondence. I should have declined the invitation, maintained the distance I'd worked so hard to establish, but the thought of seeing Sophia again, even in a setting surrounded by family and friends, pulled at me with irresistible force. I told myself I'd attend as a gesture of respect to her parents, who'd always treated me kindly despite my failings as a husband. I told myself it would provide closure, a chance to see that Sophia had truly moved on and was happy without me. I told myself a dozen lies that barely concealed the truth. I wanted to see her again. I needed to see her, even if only from across a room, even if she was there with Marcus Chun, even if it meant facing everything I'd lost through my own choices. Vincent tried to talk me out of attending. This is a bad idea, Dante. You're finally starting to function normally again. Seeing her will set you back months. I'm gonna pay my respects to her father. Nothing more. You're gonna torture yourself, and we both know it. He was right, of course, but I confirmed my attendance anyway. Bought an expensive gift that struck the right balance between thoughtful and not too personal, and spent the next 2 weeks trying not to think about what I'd say to Sophia when I saw her for the first time since signing the divorce paper. The universe, it seemed, had a different plan entirely, one that would shatter the careful emotional distance I'd constructed and force me to confront truths I'd been avoiding for nearly a year. The Chun family home in Oak Park looked exactly as I remembered it. A modest 2-story colonial with meticulous landscaping that reflected Professor Chun's orderly mind and Mrs. Chun's aesthetic sensibilities. Cars lined the street, suggesting a substantial gathering. I'd arrived deliberately late, hoping to minimize the time I'd have to spend making small talk while hyper-aware of Sophia's presence. Vincent had insisted on accompanying me, positioning himself as my driver and security, despite my protest that a family birthday party didn't require armed protection. protection, but he'd been right to insist, as I discovered the moment I walked through the front door and felt my legs nearly give out beneath me. Sophia stood in the living room surrounded by relatives, and she was holding a child, not just any child, a little boy, maybe 18 months old, with dark hair that curled slightly at the edges and features that sent shockwaves through my entire system. Even from across the room, even though he was facing partially away from me, something about him triggered recognition so profound it felt cellular. I stopped moving completely, causing Vincent to nearly collide with me from behind. "Dante?" His voice seemed to come from very far away. "What's wrong?" I couldn't answer, couldn't breathe, couldn't process what I was seeing. Sophia turned slightly, adjusting her hold on the child, and that's when I saw his face fully. Dark eyes, strong jaw, even in infant form, the distinctive shape of his eyebrows that I saw every morning in my own mirror. My son, I was looking at my son. The mathematical calculation happened automatically. 18 months old meant he'd been born roughly 9 months after our final time together, before she'd moved out, before she'd discovered what I really was, before our marriage had dissolved. The timeline aligned perfectly, devastatingly, with the last night we'd spent together before everything fell apart. Is that Vincent's voice carried shock and something that might have been fury. "Dante, is that your child?" I still couldn't speak. The room seemed to tilt around me, sounds fading to white noise except for the little boy's laugh as Sophia tickled him gently. He had my laugh too, the same cadence I recognized from old home videos my mother had kept. Sophia hadn't told me. For nearly 2 years she'd been raising our son alone, and she hadn't told me. The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd experienced, even deeper than watching her walk away after discovering my true nature. She'd kept my child from me, denied me nearly 2 years of his life. But beneath the betrayal and anger, another emotion surged. Wonder. Awe. Overwhelming love for a child I'd only just learned existed. Everything I'd built, all the power and territory and respect, suddenly seemed meaningless compared to the small person across the room who carried my DNA, my legacy, my features stamped onto his innocent face. "We're leaving," Vincent said quietly, his hand on my arm trying to steer me back toward the door. "Now, before you do something you'll regret." No, the word came out harder than intended. "I'm not leaving, Dante. You're in shock. You need to process this somewhere private. Not at a family gathering where you might cause a scene that makes everything worse." He was right. My hands were shaking with the effort of maintaining control. Every instinct screamed at me to cross the room, to confront Sophia, to demand answers about why she'd hidden our son's existence. But creating a scene at her father's birthday party would only hurt everyone, especially the little boy who had no idea his father was standing 20 feet away. 5 minutes, I said through clenched teeth. "I'll pay my respects to Professor Chun and leave, but I'm not running away without acknowledging I was here." Vincent's expression showed he thought this was a terrible idea, but he knew better than to argue when I used that particular tone. We moved through the gathering, me operating on autopilot while my mind raced through implications and possibilities. How had she hidden a pregnancy? Why hadn't any of my family members mentioned seeing her visibly pregnant in the months after our separation? Had she left Chicago entirely during that time? Professor Chun greeted me with genuine warmth, apparently unaware of the bomb that had just detonated in my chest. "Dante, I'm so glad you could come. Sophia wasn't sure you'd attend. I wouldn't miss celebrating your birthday, Professor. You and Mrs. Chun were always kind to me, even when I didn't deserve it." "Nonsense. You were a good husband to our daughter. Things simply didn't work out, but that doesn't erase the good years." He gestured across the room. "Have you seen our grandson?" Sophia brought him. "We don't get to see him as often as we'd like since she moved to San Francisco." San Francisco. That explained how she'd managed to hide the pregnancy and birth. She'd left Chicago entirely, put 3 time zones between us. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting him yet. You should. His name is Luca. Brilliant child, already saying full sentences. Takes after his mother's intelligence, thank goodness. Luca. She'd named our son Luca, an Italian name that honored my heritage even while keeping him secret from me. The detail made everything more complicated, suggesting she'd thought about me while raising our child, that she hadn't completely erased my existence from his life, even if she'd kept his existence hidden from mine. I managed to extricate myself from the conversation with Professor Chun, claiming a business emergency that required my attention. Vincent had the car running before I reached the sidewalk, understanding without being told that I need immediately. "San Francisco," I said once we were safely away from the house. "She took my son to San Francisco. You don't know for certain he's yours," Vincent said, though his tone suggested he didn't believe his own words. "The resemblance could be coincidental. You saw him, Vincent. Don't insult my intelligence by suggesting coincidence. That child is mine." "Then why didn't she tell you?" "She had multiple opportunities during the divorce proceeding. She could have used the pregnancy for leverage, demanded better settlement terms, anything. Instead, she took nothing and disappeared across the country." The question had been circling in my mind since the moment I'd seen Luca. Why keep his existence secret? Sophia wasn't vindictive. She'd never shown any signs of wanting to hurt me, despite how I'd hurt her through deception. If anything, she'd made the divorce as painless as possible, asking for almost nothing despite being entitled to half my legitimate assets. She thought she was protecting him, I said slowly, the realization settling over me with heavy certainty, from my world, from the danger that comes with being connected to the Russo family. She'd just discovered I was a criminal. Of course, she wouldn't want to raise our child in that environment, so she made the decision for you. Decided you didn't deserve to know about your own son. The anger in Vincent's voice matched what I was feeling, but underneath the anger was something more complicated. Understanding. Sophia had made the same choice I'd made throughout our marriage, deciding what was best for someone else without giving them input. I'd kept her in the dark about my true nature to protect her. She'd kept Luca's existence secret to protect him. We'd both been operating from love and fear, making terrible decisions we'd thought were necessary. I need to know everything, I told Vincent. Where exactly she's living in San Francisco, what she does for work, whether she's still seeing Marcus Chun or anyone else, her daily routines, security vulnerabilities. Everything. You're planning to take the child. I'm planning to meet my son. What happens after that depends on how reasonable Sophia wants to be. Vincent made a call while we drove back to my apartment, mobilizing resources that would have Sophia's entire San Francisco life mapped out within 48 hours. The Russo family had connections across the country. People who owed us favors, investigators who specialized in finding information others wanted kept hidden. Back in my apartment, I poured whiskey with shaking hands and tried to process the emotional whiplash of the past hour. I had a son, a beautiful little boy who looked just like me. Nearly 2 years of his life had passed without me knowing he existed, without me being present for first steps or first words or any of the 1,000 moments that made up a childhood. The grief of that lost time hit me with physical force. I'd missed everything. Sophia had been pregnant and alone, dealing with morning sickness and doctor's appointments and all the fears that came with impending motherhood, and I hadn't been there. She'd given birth without me, brought Luca home to an empty apartment or maybe her parents' house, figured out parenting through sleepless nights and overwhelming responsibility, all while I'd been in Chicago thinking our marriage was simply over. But beneath the grief was something else, determination. Luca was my son, my blood, my legacy. Sophia had made her choice to keep him secret, but that choice ended the moment I'd seen his face. I would be part of his life. I would know my son, and if Sophia tried to keep him from me, she'd discover that crossing the Russo family had consequences she couldn't imagine. My phone buzzed with the first preliminary report from Vincent's investigator. Sophia lived in a modest apartment in the Mission District, continued her translation work remotely, had a small network of friends, but no serious romantic relationship. She'd built a quiet life for herself and Luca, carefully separate from the world I inhabited. That separation was about to end, because while I'd signed divorce papers and let Sophia go, while I'd accepted that our marriage was over and she deserved better than I could offer, there was no universe in which I'd accept being kept from my own child. Sophia was about to learn that some connections couldn't be severed with signatures and distance. Our story wasn't over. It had simply entered a new, far more complicated chapter. One that would force both of us to confront everything we'd been running from, and this time I wouldn't let fear or misguided protection drive my decisions. This time I'd fight for what was mine with every resource at my disposal. Luca Russo, my son, and nothing, not distance or time or Sophia's very understandable desire to keep him safe, would keep me from knowing him. The flight to San Francisco departed at 6 in the morning, 3 days after the birthday party that had shattered my carefully reconstructed world. Vincent sat beside me in first class, reviewing security protocols for what he insisted on calling an operation rather than a personal visit. He'd spent the past 72 hours gathering intelligence about Sophia's life with the same thoroughness he brought to analyzing rival families' weaknesses. She takes Luca to Golden Gate Park every Saturday morning around 9, Vincent reported, his voice low despite the relative privacy of our seats. Weather permitting, they go to the playground near the California Academy of Sciences. She usually brings coffee from the cafe on the corner of 9th and Irving. I stared out the window at the clouds below, trying to quiet the storm of emotions that had been building since I'd seen my son's face. Anger at Sophia for keeping him secret, grief for the time I'd lost, fear that I'd somehow damage him by entering his life, overwhelming love for a child I barely knew. I'm not kidnapping him, I said, responding to the concern Vincent hadn't voiced, but I could feel radiating from it. I just want to see him again, to talk to Sophia, and if she refuses to let you be part of his life, then I'd face that problem when it arose. But the determination that had built my empire, that had allowed me to survive and thrive in a world where weakness meant death, now focused entirely on one goal. I would know my son. I would be his father. Whatever that required, whatever bridges I had to build or burn, I would not be kept from Luca. The apartment in the Mission District was exactly as the investigator had described, a converted Victorian split into units. Sophia's on the second floor with a small balcony overlooking the street. I watched from the cafe across the street, nursing espresso that tasted like ash while waiting for her to emerge with Luca for their Saturday morning routine. She appeared at 8:45. Luca balanced on her hip while she locked the apartment door. He wore tiny jeans and a blue jacket, his dark hair slightly mussed from morning activity. Even from across the street, I could see him chattering away at Sophia, his small hands gesturing enthusiastically while she listened with the patient attention that had first made me fall in love with her. They looked happy, complete, a perfect little family that didn't need the complication of a mafia boss, father inserting himself into their peaceful existence. For a moment, I almost convinced myself to leave, to return to Chicago and let them have the normal life they'd built without me. Then Luca laughed, that same distinctive sound I'd noticed at the birthday party, and I was moving before conscious thought could stop me. I crossed the street with Vincent trailing behind, my heart pounding harder than it had during actual life-threatening threatening situations. Sophia saw me when I was still half a block away. She froze completely, color draining from her face, her arms tightening protectively around Luca. "Sophia," I said when I was close enough that she could hear me without me raising my voice. "We need to talk. How did you find me?" Her voice carried shock and something that might have been fear, though whether she was afraid for herself or for Luca, I couldn't determine. "Does it matter? What matters is that you've been hiding my son from me for nearly 2 years. Luca had stopped chattering, his dark eyes fixed on me with the intense curiosity of toddlers encountering something new. He didn't look afraid, just interested, one small hand reaching toward me before Sophia gently redirected it. "Not here," she said quietly. "Not in the street, then where?" "Because I'm not leaving San Francisco until we have this conversation." She looked at Vince, who'd positioned himself several feet away but close enough to intervene if needed. Something in her expression suggested she understood exactly who he was and why he was there. "The park. We'll talk at the park." Golden Gate Park was beautiful in the morning light, fog still clinging to the trees while early joggers and dog walkers enjoyed the cool air. Sophia chose a bench near the playground, but not so close that Luca would be distracted by the other children. She set him down carefully, keeping one hand on his shoulder while he examined a Pinacon with the focused intensity only toddlers could manage. "His name is Luca," she said without preamble. "He'll be 2 in 3 months. He's healthy, happy, and he doesn't know anything about you or your world." "Our world," I corrected. "He's my son too, Sophia. You had no right to keep his existence from me. I had every right." Her voice carried steel I'd rarely heard from her. "You lied to me about who you were for 3 years. You married me under false pretenses, made me complicit in a criminal enterprise I knew nothing about. When I found out the truth, I was already pregnant. What was I supposed to do? Raise our child in that environment? You were supposed to tell me. Give me the chance to be his father." "And what kind of father can you be, Dante? Would you take him to your meetings where you discuss territory disputes and enforcement actions? Let him grow up around violence and deception? Watch him become another generation of Russo men who choose power over everything else?" The accusations hurt because they carried truth. Everything she said, every concern she voiced, I'd already thought myself during the sleepless nights since discovering Luca's existence. What kind of father could I be? How could I possibly be part of his life without exposing him to dangers no child should face? "He deserves to know his father," I said quietly. "Whatever my failings, whatever mistakes I've made, he deserves that chance. You don't get to decide unilaterally that I'm too dangerous to be in his life." Sophia's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. "I was protecting him. You were punishing me, and in doing so, you punished him too. Every child deserves to know both parents if possible. You took that from Luca, and you took nearly 2 years of his life from me. That's not protection, Sophia. That's revenge." She flinched as if I'd struck her. Luca, sensing his mother's distress through the mysterious connection children had with their parents, abandoned his Pinacone and climbed into her lap. He patted her face with one small hand, his expression concerned in a way that made my chest ache. "Mama sad?" he asked, his voice carrying that distinctive toddler inflection that turns statements into questions. "Mama's okay, baby," Sophia said, pulling him close and pressing her face into his hair. When she looked up at me again, her expression had shifted from defensive to something more vulnerable. I was scared. When I found out I was pregnant, I was terrified of what it would mean. You'd just revealed yourself to be someone completely different from who I thought you were. I didn't know if you'd want the baby, if you'd try to take him from me, if you'd use him somehow in your business dealings. So I ran. I chose safety over everything else. I would never hurt him, I said, the words carrying absolute certainty. Whatever you think of me, whatever I've done in my life, I would never hurt our son. Not intentionally, maybe, but your world is dangerous, Dante. People die. Families get caught in crossfire. Children become targets when their parents have enemies. I've read the news stories about organized crime families, about children who grow up traumatized, who witness violence, who lose parents to prison or worse. I couldn't subject Luca to that. I understood her fears because I shared them. My childhood had been privileged but far from normal. I'd learned to recognize threats before most kids learn to read. I'd understood the importance of loyalty and silence before I'd understood algebra. I'd witnessed violence that no child should see, been trained in skills no child should need. The life my father had prepared me for had stolen innocence I could never recover. What if there was a way for me to be in his life without bringing that danger, I asked, an idea forming even as I spoke. What if I could protect him from my world while still being his father? There isn't a way. You are who you are. The Russo family is what it is. Those things don't change just because you have a son, don't they? My father changed after he compartmentalized better, took fewer risks, built legitimate businesses that could provide for us without constantly courting prison or death. He wasn't perfect, but he tried to give me something more than just the criminal empire. Sophia studied me with those intelligent eyes that had always seen more than I wanted revealed. Did it work? Are you happier because you tried to compartmentalize? Or did it just teach you to hide what you really are from the people who love you? The observation cut deep because it was accurate. My father's attempts to shield me from the worst aspects of his work had ultimately taught me to deceive, to present different versions of myself to different people, to believe that love meant protecting others from truth rather than trusting them with it. I don't know, I admitted, but I know that not having a father at all would have been worse. Luca deserves the chance to know me even if I'm flawed. Even if I can't give him a completely normal life, I can still be his father in the ways that matter. And how do you propose to do that from Chicago while we live here? I'll come here as often as you'll allow. Or you could come back to Chicago. I'll provide housing, security, whatever you need to feel safe. I'm not coming back to Chicago. My life is here now. Luca's life is here. The finality in her voice told me this wasn't negotiable. Sophia had built a new life 3,000 miles from mine, and she had no intention of giving it up. If I wanted to be part of Luca's life, it would have to be on her terms, in her territory, playing by rules she would set. Then I'll come here, I said simply. Every weekend if you'll allow it, more often if possible. I'll get an apartment in the city, establish legitimate business interests that explain my presence, whatever it takes to be in his life. Just like that, you'll append your entire existence for a child you've only just learned about? He's my son, Sophia. There's nothing I wouldn't do for him. Including this single quote. Sophia watched me for a long moment, searching for deception or ulterior motives. Whatever she saw in my expression must have convinced her I was serious, because her shoulders dropped slightly, some of the defensive tension leaving her body. Luca had grown bored with our conversation and was now investigating a nearby flower bed with the single-minded determination that characterized toddler exploration. If you're going to be in his life, there are conditions, she said finally. Non-negotiable conditions that you'll follow completely, or I'll take him somewhere you'll never find us. Don't doubt that I can do it. Dante, I've learned things about disappearing that your investigators would be impressed by. The threat should have angered me. Instead, it sparked something like respect. This was the strength I'd always known existed beneath Sophia's gentle exterior, the core of steel that had attracted me in the first place. She'd always been stronger than people assumed, including me. Name your conditions. First, Luca never knows about your real business. As far as he's concerned, you're a restaurant owner and businessman. Nothing more. If he ever discovers the truth, our arrangement ends immediately. Agreed. Second, none of your associates come near him. No Vincent, no captains, no one from that world. When you're with Luca, you come alone and unarmed. I won't have him exposed to any of that. The condition about Vincent stung because he was my oldest friend, someone I trusted with my life, but I understood Sophia's reasoning. Agreed. Third, you don't make promises you can't keep. If you say you're coming to visit, you show up. If you commit to being at his birthday party or any other event, you're there. Luca doesn't need a father who disappoints him because criminal business took priority. I'll be there. Whatever I have to rearrange, I'll be there. And fourth, the most important one. If at any point your presence in his life creates danger for him, if your enemies discover his existence, if being your son puts a target on his back, you disappear from our lives completely. You don't get to decide that we can handle the risk. The moment there's real danger, you're gone. Understood? The fourth condition felt like a knife twisting in my chest. She was asking me to agree to voluntarily walk away from my son if my world ever threatened him, but I also recognized the wisdom in it. Luca's safety had to come before my desire to be his father. Understood, I said, though the word cost me more than she could know. I'll do whatever keeps him safe. Sophia studied me for another long moment, then seemed to come to a decision. She called Luca back from his exploration, lifting him onto her lap where he could see me properly. Luca, there's someone I want you to meet. This is Dante. He's a friend of Mama's. Luca regarded me with those dark eyes that were so much like mine, his expression serious in a way that seemed too old for his age. Hi, he said finally, then hid his face against Sophia's shoulder with the sudden shyness that young children exhibited around strangers. Hello, Luca, I said, my voice rougher than intended. It's very nice to meet you. He peeked at me from the safety of his mother's arms, curiosity apparently overcoming shyness. You talk funny. Sophia suppressed a smile. That's called an accent, baby. Dante grew up speaking a different language too, like Mama. Like Chinese? Luca's interest was clearly piqued. He'd been learning Mandarin along with English, his bilingual upbringing one of the things Sophia had maintained from our shared life. Like Italian, I said, switching to my native language for a few words. Piacere di conoscerti, Luca. His eyes widened with delight. What does that mean? It means nice to meet you in Italian. Can you teach me more Italian words? I looked at Sophia, asking silent permission. She hesitated, then nodded slightly. Maybe Dante can teach you some Italian words while we walk to the playground. Would you like that? Luca nodded enthusiastically, already wiggling down from her lap. Before I could process what was happening, he'd walked over to me and held up his small hand with the expectation that I'd take it. The simple gesture of trust from this little boy who didn't know I was his father nearly undid me completely. I took his hand carefully, my larger hand engulfing his tiny one, and felt something fundamental shift in my chest. This was my son, my child, the most important thing I'd ever be responsible for protecting. Everything else in my life, all the power and territory and respect, suddenly seemed insignificant compared to this small hand in mine. We walked to the playground together, Luca chattering away about the things he saw while I taught him simple Italian words. Tree became alboro, sky became cielo, dog became cane. He absorbed the new vocabulary with the effortless learning capacity of young children, repeating each word carefully until he got the pronunciation right. Sophia walked slightly behind us, close enough to intervene if needed, but giving us space to interact. I could feel her watching, evaluating every exchange, looking for signs that I was somehow dangerous to her son. Our son. The reality of that still hadn't fully settled. though holding Luca's hand made it more real with each passing moment. At the playground, Luca immediately wanted to show me his climbing skill. He scaled the small jungle gym with the fearless determination of toddlers who hadn't yet learned to be afraid of heights. Sophia moved closer, ready to catch him if he fell, but I noticed she'd let him navigate the equipment independently rather than hovering. He's very athletic, I observed, watching him swing from bar to bar with surprising coordination. He gets that from your side, apparently. I was never particularly coordinated as a child. Sophia's tone was carefully neutral, but the acknowledgement that Luca had inherited traits from me felt significant. My father used to take me to gymnastics classes when I was young, before things got complicated. He believed physical discipline built character. Did it? I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe it just taught me that everything in life requires constant effort and vigilance. I turned to look at her directly. Thank you for this. For letting me meet him. Don't thank me yet. This is a trial basis, Dante. You get supervised visits for the next 3 months. If you prove reliable, if you follow the conditions. We'll discuss expanding your role in his life. 3 months felt like an eternity, but I understood her caution. When can I see him again? Next Saturday, if you're still in the city. Same time, same place, I'll be here. And I was. For the next 3 months, I flew to San Francisco every Friday evening and spent Saturdays with Luca under Sophia's watchful supervision. We went to parks and museums, the zoo and the aquarium. I taught him Italian words and learned about his favorite things. Dinosaurs, especially raptors, the color blue, peanut butter sandwiches with the crusts cut off, music boxes and building blocks and books about trains. I rearranged my entire life around those Saturday visits. Business meetings got moved. Operations that required my direct oversight got delegated to trusted captains. Vincent managed Chicago affairs with increasing autonomy while I spent every spare moment either in San Francisco or planning my next visit. You're going to burn out, Vincent warned during one of our weekly video calls. You can't sustain this pace indefinitely. Flying back and forth every week trying to run the organization remotely, it's not viable long term. Then I'll make it viable, I said simply. This is non-negotiable, Vincent. Luca is my priority now. I'm not suggesting you abandon your son. I'm suggesting you need to find a more sustainable arrangement. Open a West Coast operation, stationed permanently in San Francisco, something that doesn't require you to live out of hotels and airplanes. The suggestion had merit, though implementing it would require careful planning. The Russo family had always been Chicago-based, our territory and influence concentrated in the Midwest. Expanding to the West Coast would mean negotiating with established families, building new relationships, essentially creating an entirely new power base. But for Luca, I'd do it. For the chance to be a real father rather than a weekend visitor, I'd restructure everything. By month 3, Luca had grown comfortable enough with me that he'd run to greet me when Sophia brought him to our meeting spot. He'd throw himself into my arms with the complete trust of children who hadn't yet learned that trust could be betrayed. Those moments when he hugged me, when he called me by name with genuine affection, were worth every sacrifice I'd made. Sophia had softened too, though she maintained careful boundaries. We'd progressed from supervised visits at public locations to me spending time with Luca at her apartment, while she worked in another room. She'd started asking my opinion about parenting decisions. Small things like what kind of preschool might be best or whether Luca was ready for swimming lessons felt like progress, like maybe we could build something functional from the wreckage of our marriage, like maybe Luca could have both his parents in his life even if we weren't together. Then came the Saturday that changed everything. I'd just arrived at Sophia's apartment ready for our usual day together when I noticed Luca wasn't his normal, energetic self. He clung to Sophia with unusual neediness, his face flushed. He woke up with a fever, Sophia explained, pressing her lips to his forehead with the worry only parents understood. It's probably just a virus, but I don't want to take him out in case it's something worse. I'm sorry, Dante. I know you flew all the way here, but maybe we should reschedule. Or I could stay here, I said, help you take care of it. I'm capable of monitoring a sick child. Sophia hesitated, clearly torn between maintaining boundaries and accepting help with a sick toddler. You don't have to do that, I want to. Let me be useful, Sophia. Let me be his father in the ways that matter, including the unglamorous parts like dealing with fevers. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, thank you. We spent the day taking turns monitoring Luca's temperature, offering him juice and crackers, watching children's shows while he dozed fitfully. It was mundane and exhausting and somehow more meaningful than any of our previous visits. This was real parenting, the unglamorous reality of caring for a sick child. By evening, Luca's fever had broken and he'd fallen into genuine sleep rather than the restless dozing that had characterized the afternoon. Sophia and I sat in her small living room, exhausted but relieved, sharing takeout Chinese food from containers that reminded me of date nights from our marriage. The domesticity of the moment felt dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with my usual concerns about physical threats. You were good with him today, Sophia said quietly, setting down her chopsticks. Natural in a way I didn't expect. What did you expect? I don't know. Maybe that you'd be awkward or uncomfortable with the messy reality of sick children. Most men in your position would have left when they realized it wouldn't be a fun day at the park. Most men in my position aren't trying to make up for 2 years of missed time with their son. I paused, choosing my next words carefully. Sophia, I want to be more than a weekend visitor. I want to be a real father to Luca. She studied me with that intelligence that had always seen through my carefully constructed facades. What are you proposing? I'm establishing operations in San Francisco. legitimate restaurants and hotel properties that will give me reasons to be here regularly. I've already started negotiations for property in North Beach in the financial district. You're moving to San Francisco for Luca, for the chance to be his father properly. Not flying back and forth, not living in hotels, not treating his childhood like business trips I can schedule around meetings. I leaned forward, needing her to understand how serious I was. I want mornings and evenings, not just Saturday after. I want to be there when he wakes up with nightmares or when he has questions about the world. I want to be present in the boring, everyday moments that actually make up a life. And your business in Chicago, the empire you've spent your entire life building, Vincent can manage the day-to-day operations. I'll return as needed, but my priority's here now, with Luca. And if I'm being honest with you too, Sophia's expression shifted to something wary. Dante, don't. We're not doing this. Doing what? Acknowledging that I still love you? That I never stopped loving you even when I signed those divorce papers? That every moment I spend with you makes me remember why I married you in the first place? We're divorced for good reasons. Reasons that haven't changed just because we have a son together, haven't they? You wanted honesty, Sophia. You wanted to know who I really was rather than the fiction I presented. Well, now you know. You've known for nearly 3 years, and I'm still here, still fighting to be in your life and our son's life. Doesn't that count for something? She stood abruptly, moving to the window that overlooked the street. Her apartment was small but carefully decorated, filled with the kind of personal touches that made a space feel like home. Photos of Luca at various ages, books in both English and Mandarin, plants that she'd somehow kept alive despite her schedule. It was warm and lived in a way my sterile Chicago apartment had never been. You lied to me for 3 years, Dante. 3 years of building a life on foundations of deception. Do you have any idea what that did to me? How it felt to discover that the man I loved, the man I married, didn't actually exist? That he was a carefully constructed character you performed while hiding your true self? I know I hurt you. I know my deception was unforgivable, but I also know that what I felt for you was real. My love was real, even if everything else was a lie. How am I supposed to believe that? How am I supposed to trust anything you say when I know how skilled you are at deception? For all I know, this entire campaign to be part of Luca's life is just another manipulation, another performance designed to get what you want. The accusation stung because I understood where it came from. I destroyed her ability to trust me through years of calculated dishonesty. Rebuilding that trust would take more than 3 months of Saturday visits and grand declarations. You want proof? I pulled out my phone and opened an encrypted app that connected to my security systems. This is live feed from my Chicago apartment. Watch. On the screen, my living room appeared, empty except for furniture and the accumulated possessions of my life. I switched to another camera angle showing my bedroom, then my office, then the building's garage where my cars sat unused. What am I supposed to be seeing? Evidence that I haven't been in Chicago except for absolutely necessary business trips in over a month. That apartment where we lived together, where I thought I was protecting you by keeping you separate from my world, sits empty most of the time now because I'm here in San Francisco, in a hotel room that costs a fortune because I refuse to miss time with Luca. I pulled up calendar records, financial statements, anything that would demonstrate the complete restructuring of my life around our son. Look at my schedule, Sophia. Every meeting, every decision, every single aspect of my business gets arranged around making sure I'm here every Saturday without fail. Vincent has been running Chicago operations because I'm not there to do it myself. I've turned down opportunities worth millions because accepting them would mean missing time with Luca. Sophia took the phone, scrolling through the evidence with the careful attention she'd always brought to important decisions. When she looked up, her eyes held confusion and something that might have been cautious hope. Why are you showing me this? Because you need to know I'm serious. This isn't a performance or manipulation. This is me restructuring my entire life around the family I didn't know I had until 3 months ago. This is me proving that Luca and you matter more than anything else. I'm not part of that equation anymore, Dante. We're divorced, co-parents at best. You don't get to include me in your grand gestures, don't I? You think I can spend every Saturday with you, watching you be an incredible mother to our son, remembering everything I loved about you and not want to fix what I broke? You think I can see the life you've built and not want to be part of it? You can't just decide we're getting back together because it's convenient for your relationship with Luca. That's not how this works. I'm not deciding anything. I'm putting myself out there and risking rejection because the alternative is living the rest of my life knowing I didn't even try to fix the biggest mistake I ever made. Sophia sank back onto the couch, her expression troubled. Even if I wanted to try again, and I'm not saying I do, how would that even work? Your world hasn't changed. You're still who you are. The danger, the deception, all the reasons I left haven't disappeared. No, but I have changed. I'm not trying to hide who I am anymore. I'm not trying to protect you through ignorance. If we did this, if you gave me another chance, it would be with complete honesty about everything. No more secrets, no more carefully constructed fictions, just the truth, however ugly it might be. The truth is that you order people killed, that you run criminal enterprises, that you live in a world where violence is routine and people die over territory disputes. How is honesty about those things supposed to make them acceptable? It's not supposed to make them acceptable. It's supposed to give you the choice I never gave you before. The choice to love me knowing exactly what that means, or to walk away because you can't accept what I am. But an informed choice this time, Sophia. Not a choice based on lies and omissions. She was quiet for a long time, processing everything I'd said. Outside her window, San Francisco carried on its evening routine, unaware that my entire future hung on her response. I'd faced down rival families, negotiated with people who'd kill me without hesitation, survived situations that should have been fatal. None of that had prepared me for this vulnerability, this complete exposure of wanting something I had no power to take. I need time, she said finally. This is too much to process right now. You can't just appear in my life after 2 years, discover you have a son, and expect me to make decisions about our relationship in a few months. I'm not expecting anything except the chance to prove I've changed, that I can be the man you deserved from the beginning. And if I can't give you that chance, if the best I can offer is co-parent. The question hurt, but I forced myself to answer honestly. Then I'll accept. I'll be the best father I can be to Luca, and respect whatever boundaries you need. But I'm not giving up hope, Sophia. I can't. Not when I can see what we could have if you'd let us try again. A sound from Luca's room interrupted us, his sleepy voice calling for his mama, needing comfort from the lingering effects of his illness. Sophia stood immediately, moving toward his room with the automatic response of mothers everywhere. At the doorway, she paused and looked back at me. Stay tonight on the couch, in case his fever comes back and I need help. She hesitated, then added, just tonight. Don't read more into it than what it is. But as I settled onto her uncomfortable couch hours later, listening to the sounds of Sophia comforting Luca back to sleep, I couldn't help but feel like this was progress. She'd let me into her home overnight. She'd accepted my help with our 6th son. She hadn't immediately rejected the possibility of us trying again. It wasn't much, but it was more than I'd had that morning. And in a world where I'd learned to build empires through patience and strategic planning, I understood that small victories could lead to larger triumphs if I played my hand correctly. 6 months after discovering Luca's existence, I stood in the living room of my new San Francisco apartment, watching furniture delivery men arrange pieces I'd selected with far more care than I'd ever given to my Chicago penthouse. This wasn't just a place to sleep between business meetings. This was meant to be a home where my son could visit, where he'd have his own room decorated with dinosaurs and trains, where memories could be built rather than just time marked off. Vincent had flown in to help coordinate the final logistics of my West Coast expansion. Russo Hospitality Group now owned 3 restaurant properties and 2 boutique hotels in San Francisco, all legitimate businesses that provided perfect cover for my presence while generating actual profit. The operations ran cleanly, no hint of the darker enterprises that still anchored our Chicago base. You're really doing this, Vincent said, not quite making it a question, completely restructuring your life around being a father. Is that so hard to believe? From the Dante Russo who used to say family was a weakness enemies could exploit? Yes, actually. It's hard to believe, he paused, then added, but it suits you. You seem more settled than I've seen you in years. Settled wasn't the word I'd have chosen. Every moment with Luca filled me with terror that I'd somehow damage him, that my world would contaminate his innocence, that I'd fail him the way I'd failed Sophia. But beneath the fear was something else. Purpose. Joy. The kind of uncomplicated love I hadn't felt since childhood, before I'd learned that love always came with calculations and intricacies. Luca had started calling me Papa 2 weeks earlier, not prompted by Sophia or me, just a natural evolution of our relationship that had nearly brought me to my knees the first time I'd heard it. Papa, can you read this book? Papa, watch me jump. Papa, I made this wrong. Each casual use of the title felt like a gift I didn't deserve, but treasured beyond measure. How are things with Sophia? Vincent asked, apparently reading my thoughts from my expression. Complicated. She's letting me be more involved, trusting me with Luca for unsupervised visits. But us as a couple, that's still off the table. Maybe that's for the best. Focus on being Luca's father without the complications of trying to resurrect a failed marriage. I understood Vincent's logic, the practical wisdom of accepting what was possible rather than reaching for what seemed unattainable. But every moment I spent with Sophia reminded me of what we'd had, what we'd lost, what we might rebuild if she'd give us the chance. The way she laughed at something Luca did, the focused intelligence in her eyes when she was working on a translation, the grace with which she navigated single parenthood while maintaining her career and sense of self. I'm not giving up on her, I said simply. I know it's impractical and probably foolish, but I can't. Vincent sighed, but didn't argue further. He knew me well enough to recognize when my mind was set. Instead, he pulled out his tablet and brought up security protocols we needed to review. The price of my San Francisco presence was constant vigilance. New city meant new potential threats, new families whose territory I was sharing, new variables that needed monitoring. The Liang organization has been watching your movements, Vincent reported. Nothing aggressive, just gathering intelligence. They control most of the Chinatown operations and they're curious about your intentions. Arrange a meeting. Make it clear I'm here for legitimate business and family reasons, not to encroach on their territory. I want peace with local organizations, not conflict. That's a significant shift from your Chicago approach. Chicago is about maintaining power my grandfather built. San Francisco is about building something new, something better. I don't need to be the dominant force here. I just need to be present for my son. The words would have been unthinkable a year earlier. The old Dante Russo never would have prioritized family over territorial expansion, never would have voluntarily ceded dominance to other organizations, but fatherhood had reordered my priorities in ways I was still processing. Later that afternoon, I picked up Luca from Sophia's apartment for his first overnight stay at my new place. He'd been excited all week about having his own room at Papa's house, chattering about which stuffed animals would sleep there and whether his new bed would be as comfortable as his bed at Mama's. Remember, Sophia said as she handed me Luca's overnight bag, he likes his dinosaur nightlight on. He'll ask for 3 bedtime stories but falls asleep after 2. And if he has a nightmare, sitting with him for a few minutes usually helps. I remember from all your instructions. I assured her, understanding that her detailed list was as much about managing her own anxiety as helping me. This was the first time she'd let Luca stay overnight anywhere except her parents' house. Trust didn't come as easily after everything I'd done to destroy it. Call me if there are any problems. Any problems at all, no matter how small, Sophia, he'll be fine. I promise. She kissed Luca goodbye with the fierce intensity of mothers everywhere, then watched from her doorway as we descended the stairs. I could feel her eyes on us until we were out of sight. Maternal vigilance that made me love her even more for how fiercely she protected our son. Luca loved his new room. He explored every corner with the enthusiasm of a prospector discovering gold, exclaiming over the dinosaur bedding and the shelf of books I'd stocked and the toy chest I'd filled with things I hoped he'd enjoy. We spent the afternoon building towers with blocks, reading stories, and making simple pasta for dinner that he insisted on helping prepare despite the mess. Bath time revealed how little I actually knew about the logistics of caring for a toddler solo. Luca thought my inexperience was hilarious, giggling as I misjudged water temperature and used too much bubble bath. We got through it eventually, both of us damp but accomplished. Bedtime approached with the calm routine I'd observed during previous visits. Pajamas featuring cartoon dinosaurs, teeth brushing that became a game, the careful arrangement of stuffed animals on his new bed. Then came story time. Luca nestled against me while I read from the books Sophia had packed. He fell asleep during the second story, just as Sophia had predicted. I stayed for a few minutes after his breathing deepened into sleep, watching his peaceful face in the soft glow of the dinosaur nightlight. This small person carried my DNA, my features, possibly my future. Everything I'd built, all the power and wealth and respect, would someday be his if he wanted it. Or it wouldn't, if he chose a different path. Either way, my job was to protect him, guide him, love him unconditionally. I thought about my own father, the legacy he'd left me, the empire he'd built through violence and strategic brilliance, the lessons about loyalty and strength that had shaped who I became, the moments of genuine love mixed with the darkness of our world. He'd tried to be a good father within the constraints of who he was. Now I was trying to do the same, hoping I could somehow do better. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Is he asleep? The message carried anxiety poorly disguised as casual inquiry. I sent back a photo of Luca peaceful in his new bed, then added, "Sound asleep? No problem. You can breathe now." Her response came quickly. "Thank you for sending that. I know I'm being overprotective. You're being a good mother. It's one of the things I love most about you." I regretted the message the moment I sent it. Too honest, too revealing, pushing boundaries she'd made clear existed for good reasons. But her response surprised me. "We should talk soon. Really talk. About everything." My heart accelerated at the implication. Does everything include us? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Her typing and retyping suggested she was choosing words carefully. Finally, yes, everything includes us, but not tonight. Tonight is about you and Luca. Enjoy your first overnight together. I stared at the message for a long time, reading possibilities between the words. She wanted to talk about us, not shut down the conversation or deflect, but actually discuss whether there might be a future beyond co-parenting. It was more hope than I'd allowed myself in months. The night passed peacefully, Luca sleeping through until morning light filtered through his window. He woke slowly, confused for a moment about where he was, then remembered and smiled with satisfaction. "Papa, we're at your house." "We are indeed. What should we have for breakfast? Pancakes? Mama makes pancakes on Saturday." We made pancakes together. Or rather, I made pancakes while Luca helped by adding chocolate chips with generous enthusiasm. The kitchen ended up messier than any combat zone I'd navigated, but Luca's joy made the chaos worthwhile. We ate at my dining table that had been custom-made for entertaining business associates, now covered in sticky handprints and chocolate smears that somehow made it feel more like home than all my expensive furniture ever had. Sophia arrived to collect Luca at noon, her expression cautiously hopeful. How did it go? Perfect. He was perfect. We made pancakes and only caused moderate destruction to the kitchen. Luca launched into an excited recounting of his overnight adventure, his words tumbling over each other in his rush to tell Mama everything. Sophia listened with the patient attention she always gave him, but I noticed her eyes kept drifting to me, assessing something I couldn't quite read. After Luca had been properly collected along with his overnight bag and the drawing he'd made that morning, Sophia lingered in my doorway. "About that talk I mentioned. Are you free tomorrow evening? My parents can watch Luca. I'll make myself free." quickly. My apartment, 7 o'clock. And Dante, come prepared for complete honesty. If we're going to have this conversation, we're doing it without the careful avoidance we've been practicing. Complete honesty. I agreed, understanding that this conversation would determine whether we had a future or would remain politely distant co-parents. I'll be there. After they left, I stood in my apartment that still smelled faintly of chocolate chip pancakes and thought about what complete honesty would mean. Telling Sophia everything about my world, the parts I'd hidden during our marriage, admitting how thoroughly I'd failed her through deception, acknowledging that loving her meant accepting she might choose to walk away again, but it also meant the possibility of something real, something built on truth rather than convenient fiction, and for that possibility, I'd risk anything. I arrived at Sophia's apartment at exactly 7 o'clock the next evening, carrying nothing but the truth I'd promised to deliver. No flowers, no gifts, no grand gestures that might seem like manipulation. Just me, stripped of all the careful personas I'd constructed over a lifetime of deception. She'd clearly prepared for the conversation as seriously as I had. The apartment was tidy, but not obsessively so, suggesting she'd wanted the space clean without making it seem like she was trying too hard. She wore jeans and a simple sweater, comfortable but put together. Her hair was down, the way I'd always loved it. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing me toward the couch where we'd had so many conversations over the past months. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Just water, thank you." We sat with careful distance between us, the physical space mirroring the emotional gap we were trying to bridge. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on the room. "I've been thinking about what you said," Sophia began, her hands clasped in her lap, "about wanting complete honesty this time, about building something real rather than the fiction we had before. And I realized that if we're going to have that conversation, I need to be honest too, about why I really kept Luca from you. You said it was to protect him from my world. That was part of it, but not all of it." She took a deep breath, gathering courage for whatever she was about to say. "I was angry, Dante, furious. You'd lied to me for 3 years, made me complicit in things I would never have chosen if I'd known the truth. When I found out I was pregnant, part of me wanted to hurt you the way you'd hurt me. Keeping Luca's secret felt like justice somehow, like balancing the scales for all the deception. The admission hung in the air between us, painful but necessary. Thank you for telling me that. I'm not proud of it." As time passed and Luca grew, I realized what I was taking from both of you. He deserved to know his father, and you deserved to know your son. But I'd committed to the lie by then, built an entire life around keeping him hidden. Admitting the truth felt like admitting I'd been wrong, and I wasn't ready to do that. What changed? Why let me into his life now? Seeing you at my father's birthday party, the look on your face when you saw Luca, it wasn't calculation or strategy. It was pure, unguarded emotion, love and grief and longing, all mixed together. In that moment, I understood that whatever else you'd done, whatever lies you'd told, your feelings for him were real, and real feelings deserved a chance. I moved closer, drawn by her honesty and the vulnerability it required. "I need to tell you things about my world, things I should have told you from the beginning. They're not pleasant, and they might make you decide you can't be, but you deserve to know. Then tell me." So I did. I told her about the organization I'd inherited, the legitimate businesses that masked less legal enterprises. One explained how territory disputes were resolved, what happened to people who betrayed the family, the reality of violence that underpinned everything I'd built. I described operations I'd authorized, decisions I'd made, due the weight of being responsible for an empire that operated outside society's rules. Sophia listened without interrupting, her expression carefully neutral. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time, processing everything I'd revealed. "Have you ever killed anyone yourself?" she asked finally. "Yes. Recently, not since before we met. I have given orders that resulted in deaths, but I haven't personally pulled a trigger in years. And you'll continue running this organization, making these decisions?" "I've been transitioning toward more legitimate operations. The San Francisco expansion is entirely clean. Eventually, I want to phase out the criminal enterprises completely, though that will take years of careful planning. But for now, I'm still responsible for activities that would send me to prison if law enforcement could prove them." She stood, moving to the window that overlooked the street. "I don't know how to reconcile the man who makes chocolate chip pancakes with my son with the man you're describing. They seem like completely different people. They're not. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I'm both. The father who loves Luca more than anything and the criminal who's done terrible things. Both exist in the same person, and I can't separate them no matter how much I wish I could. And if we tried again, if I let you back into my life as more than Luca's father, what would that look like? Would I have to lie to friends and family about what you really do? Pretend ignorance the way you made me complicit before? No, you'd know everything. Make informed choices about what you can accept and what you can't. If there are aspects of my work you don't want to know details about, I'll respect, but no more fundamental deceptions about who I am." Sophia turned to face me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I want to believe that's possible. I want to believe we could build something real this time, but I'm terrified, Dante. Terrified of getting hurt again. Terrified of what being with you might mean for Luca's safety. Terrified that I'm making another mistake out of love and nostalgia rather than wisdom. I crossed to her, taking her hands in mine. I'm terrified too. Terrified I'll fail you both. Terrified my world will contaminate what we're building. Terrified that even with complete honesty, I'm not enough. But I'd rather fail trying to build something real than succeed at maintaining comfortable distance. What if it doesn't work? What if we try and it falls apart again? Then we'll have tried. And Luca will still have two parents who love him, just not together. But Sophia, what if it does work? What if honesty and effort and time can heal what deception destroyed? Don't we owe it to ourselves to find out? She studied my face with that intelligence I'd always loved, searching for deception or manipulation. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied something because her shoulders dropped slightly, some of the defensive tension leaving her body. I need time still, not years, but months. Time to see if you can maintain the honesty you're promising. Time to understand what being with you really means now that I know the truth. Time to make sure Luca's well-being stays the priority rather than our desire to recapture what we had. I can give you time, whatever you need, and we move slowly. Dating, not jumping back into marriage or moving in together. Building trust incrementally rather than assuming it exists because we want it to. Slowly, I agreed, even though everything in me wanted to pull her close and never let go. Whatever pace you're comfortable with, she smiled then. First genuine smile I'd seen from her in nearly 3 years. I must be crazy. Getting involved again with a man who just admitted to being a criminal. Probably. But I promised to make the insanity worthwhile. She laughed, the sound striking something deep in my chest. Then, before I could process what was happening, she leaned forward and kissed me, brief and soft and achingly familiar, carrying both promise and caution. When we broke apart, I rested my forehead against hers, breathing in her scent and memorizing the moment. Does this mean we're trying? It means I'm willing to see where honesty takes us. No guarantees, Dante, just possibility. Possibility is more than I had yesterday. I'll take it. We talked for hours that night, past midnight and into early morning, about boundaries and expectations, about Luca's needs and our own fears, about what a future might look like if we could build it on truth rather than convenient fictions. It was an easy conversation. There were moments of tension and disagreement, times when our different perspectives clashed, but we talked through it all with the honesty I'd promised. No deflection or avoidance. When I finally left her apartment as dawn broke over San Francisco, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Real, genuine hope that I might get a second chance at the happiness I'd destroyed through my own failures. The next Saturday, I picked up Luca for our usual morning. As we walked to the park, him chattering about dinosaurs while holding my hand, I saw us reflected in a cafe window. Father and son, features eerily similar, connected by bonds that transcended all the mistakes I'd made. Sophia was waiting for us at the park, having decided to join us rather than sending Luca alone. She smiled as we approached, and in that smile I saw possibility, not certainty, not guarantees, but genuine possibility that we might build something beautiful from the wreckage of our past. I'd signed divorce papers 2 years ago thinking I was doing the right thing, protecting Sophia from my world. Instead, I'd nearly lost everything that mattered. Now, given an undeserved second chance, I wouldn't make the same mistakes. This time I'd fight for my family with the same determination I'd always brought to business. This time honesty would be my weapon, and love would be my strategy. And maybe, if I was very lucky and worked very hard, it would be enough.